everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Everything Went Black podcast. Karl and I continue with Darkness Weaves. We're covering the novel Darkness Weaves this week. We're breaking it up into parts, and this is part one. If you're listening to this podcast, undoubtedly you're familiar with the other horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. And if not, do yourself a favor and check out all this excellent content that's out there. Kicking things off every other Monday, we have Horror Wolf 666 brought to you by Brandon Legion. Up next on Tuesday, Jackie Smith brings you Into the Necrosphere, the greatest extreme music podcast in the land. Wednesday is the first day of double shots. Of course, we have Everything Went Black, but we also have Iblis Manifestations. Thursday is another double shot, so it's kind of a two for Thursday, if you will. In addition to being Necro Thursday, where we have the Necromaniacs Horror Podcast, we have day one of Soul Knocks, brought to you by Karl Edward. Friday, Spitball Media comes at you, an irreverent popular culture podcast. Saturday is a day off. It's spring. Make some memories, go out, touch some grass. Because on Sunday, Karl Edward returns with day two of Soul Knocks. If you enjoy this podcast, thank you very much. Please like us, subscribe, and share with your friends. But if you want to step it up, you can join the Everything Went Black Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to bonus content. For $5 a month, you get the bonus content plus early access to the regular shows. And for $25 a month, you can become a sponsor. But the island Pelin has had an evil reputation since the earliest days when man first crossed the Western Sea to settle in this region. Our history is old, and very much of the centuries preceding the empire's foundation has become obscured by myth and legend. Nonetheless, the strange stone ruins that are to be found moldering in certain shunned locations among the islands defy all understanding. Of the race that built these monolithic citadels, we know nothing. Legend insists that these ruins were here before the coming of man to the islands. Certainly the crumbling stones are of marvelous antiquity, and no man can guess what ages have passed since these Cyclopean fortresses were razed, nor at whose hand they were destroyed. There are curious myths about the hint of frightful carvings depicting colossal scenes of combat among monstrous sea beasts from a mad god's nightmare. The first seafarers who settled the islands left unsavory rumors of things carven upon certain of the eroded stones. Hideous scenes they took pains to obliterate forever were frightened blows of hammer and chisel. No such carvings today remain to verify these myths. It is on the island of Pellon that these lichen-covered ruins are to be found in greatest concentration, nor are they so advanced a state of decay as those on the southern islands. Certainly, it is not solely due to the immeasurably deep waters of the north of Pellon that no fisherman will cast these nets, that merchants sail many leagues off course to avoid the region. This area of the Western Sea is named Sorn Ellen, which is meant to mean bottomless sea in an archaic tongue. Welcome back, everyone. We're here with another episode of Darkness Weaves, and we're kicking off a novel that bears the same name as this series. Of course, that novel is Darkness Weaves by Karl Edward Wagner. Originally published as Darkness Weaves with Many Shades in 1978. That's the Coronet edition. And then the Warner Books put out a version called Darkness Weaves with the Frank Frazetta cover. And then there's been many other incarnations of this particular novel. I believe Centipede Press released something later on too. So yeah, here we are.
Yeah, and I think maybe one day it'll get reprinted again.
Yeah, once again, man, none of these stories are in print properly. You know, of course, this is available on the Kindle Books of Kane series, but you know, if you want to get a hard copy of this, you're gonna have to like scour the used bookstores or eBay or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few editions on like Abe Books for like 35 or, but you can occasionally get lucky. Um, yeah, 1970. This is the final Kane novel as well, which is crazy. You know, I am very surprised that Wagner didn't continue the Kane series into the 80s outside of the stories. You know, as we found out one of our last episodes, a lot of the short stories came after the novels, which is kind of peculiar. You know, so
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know, but it did. I don't know much. Like I said, I don't know. I think there's probably stuff going on in his personal life in the 80s. Maybe his struggle with alcoholism was getting the best of him, I think, because he seemed to have a lot less output in the 80s,
Yeah,
just in
you're
general, you know.
correct. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it sucks because I wish he was still alive, man. Like I know that he would be still cranking out awesome fiction, I think, if he was still around.
Oh yeah. I mean, like we said, I think he was born in what, 43, so 45. Um yeah, 45, so he would be what 80 if he was alive today. So, you know, 79.
I love those photos of him from the 70s and the 80s, you know, especially there's photos of him in the 80s where he's got like the Christian Death t-shirt on, you know, and like a leather jacket and stuff, you know. He just looks like a fucking cool guy.
Yeah. Definitely in the late 70s and 80s he started dressing much more like a metal dude, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I think he's definitely, and of course he had red hair and a beard. Like we said before, I definitely think that Kane was his projection in the same way that Conan was Howard. But I love the fact that Kane is a villain, a sort of villain, which I think is probably how Karl Edward Wagner felt about himself.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting about you bring up Robert E. Howard and Conan, and you know, there's that discussion about Conan being like the projection of what Howard wished he was like, and Cull being more like what Howard really was like in his life, like a brooding, sort of introspective like guy, you know?
Yeah, but I think that Wagner was kind of like, you know, I know I'm not a great guy, so you know, I'm just gonna
Yeah,
make a character that's like myself, but like more like big muscles and like
yeah.
giant and with his strangler hands, which again is mentioned in this story about
Oh
how his
yeah.
hands are like strangler hands and stuff.
Strangler hands, yep. All right, so this is broken down into sections here. So we're going to take each section one episode at a time. One episode is going to be one section of the book.
Well, we might need to break up the final because well, this one is 5 chapters. The other ones are other two sections I think are 10 chapters each.
Okay.
Two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. Yeah, so we might 10, 11, 12. We're going to probably have to split part 2 and 3 up into 2 parts each. So
Okay.
because they're both like 13, 14 chapters each. So
Right on.
I think if we stick between like, up to 6, because I think that's a good amount. So I guess this book will probably be 5 episodes altogether. So
Right on. Yeah.
yeah, I just picked this one because I was like, well, part one's only 5 chapters, so that's totally doable. So
And some of
I
the
did,
chapters are short, so
yeah. So I figure we'll probably do. I think they're both. We'll just split up the next 2 parts into half, whatever that plays out to, and that'll be easy peasy way of breaking it up. So, and I'm not in a big hurry to burn through it.
no,
Like
no, no, definitely. And
this
yeah, I
is
mean, we
yeah,
have more Wagner stories to do after this though too, so that's cool.
yeah, but it is going to be our goodbye, partial goodbye to Kane, and until we can find the Gothic touch story they did with his Elric Kane crossover, but um. which was the final Kane story. But until then, until I can track down a copy of it, which I'm trying to do on PDF because that's probably going to be the easiest way. If I can find a PDF of a Gothic Touch and I can just email it to you so we can both read it, right? Like
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
the so yeah, this will be our this is in. It's kind of bittersweet though to be like we started this. We started the Kane over 2 years ago, but I'm not Kane, but Wagner in general. But the Kane itself has been quite a bit of that time, I think. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I mean,
But
how long? When did we do? When
I
did
don't
we
even know.
start?
That's I can't answer that question, man.
I
I'm
think it was
very
like 20.
bad. I'm very bad at reckoning time these days. It's like I think back,
Yeah,
oh, that was like 2 weeks ago. It was like 3 years ago. Like ever since the pandemic, time has been a very bizarre thing.
yeah. That's what I was thinking. I think we started in whenever In the Only Place came out. So I think it was like 2023 or something. It's been a
Yeah,
couple years. It's
been a
been a
couple
few years
years.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah, at least. So maybe 3 years. I don't know.
yeah, could be. But
Yeah.
we do have more of his short fiction to do after Kane, and then when we finish that, we'll move on to another project. So there you go.
We also have Legion from the Shadows, his Bram McMorn novel, and
Yep,
also Road to Kings, his Conan novel. So
yep. I can't forget
which
those.
which I own both of those. So the Road to Kings one we can do in one episode because it's only like 150
Yeah,
pages,
it's a
200 pages.
novella.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe 2 episodes. It's very short. But anyways, yeah. So this one starts off. This first prologue, I will admit the way it's written was slightly confusing because you're getting two point of view characters concurrently, and
Yeah.
I got a little confused sometimes here or there until I figured out what was happening because it's not 100% clear that you're actually getting the point of view of both the characters interspersed with each other. You know what I mean?
I found that odd too because Wagner is his prose is usually very tight, you know what I mean? And like you have like it's very direct. Like his prose and his narrative is always very tight and well disciplined. So and I don't know, maybe he was trying to intentionally do that. But yeah, I was also I had to reread the prologue to kind of like get a sense of what actually was going on. But
Yeah, because the problem is that you're getting the two characters you meet is Arbas and then
ML,
yeah, Imel. But if you first start with Arbas and then you're in his point of view, and then all of a sudden it just kind of switches to Imel's point of view, and you're kind of, and then I had to reread a few times to figure out, and then you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? And then yeah, I had to reread this part a few times to actually sort out what was happening until I got figured out like what he was doing. You know what I mean?
yeah, totally, totally. So we're in the city of Nostablet, and we find ourselves in this tavern owned by Selrum Honest, and it's your typical tavern setting. People are drinking, merrymaking. There's like ladies of ill repute abound, you know.
Yeah, this is
Um,
about as quintessential the start of a D&D campaign type of setting. You know what I mean?
exactly,
Like,
yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, once again, the bizarreness of the point of view. I guess I'll just cut to the chase here, what's going on. So Emil is from a place called Thavnos. And essentially he's looking for Kane. He's trying to figure out how to get in touch with Kane because he's on a mission.
yeah, and he went to this guy who's called the Black Priest, who,
Bindoff, the Black Priest. Yes.
yeah, who then sent him to Arbos because apparently Arbos knows where Kane is or can communicate with Kane. So he's just trying to prologue is basically him trying to set up a meeting with with Kane essentially. So
And once again, Kane has run afoul of the local authorities and he's in hiding.
yeah, he, he's been up to his no good ways, and he's I think he's been doing some I don't, it isn't really clear what he's been doing, but he's some type of criminal
Yeah,
activity. So
he's a wanted man in the town of Nostablet.
I
Yeah.
I think he must have done something really fucked because they're like really hunting him down. Like, you know what I mean? Like later on, like they sent a fucking army after him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So his whereabouts are unknown, and Arbas, the assassin, is like the way to get to him. And that, as you mentioned, Carl, ML hits up the Black Priest and he turns him on to Arbas, and then finally we find ourselves in this tavern and the two men meet, and it's made, he makes it clear that he's looking for Kane for some undisclosed mission at this point.
yeah, and then basically it goes from there to the next chapter is essentially them going to the meeting, and our boss is leading ML. It's like rainy and shitty, and they're like climbing up these rocks to these tombs that were created in this place that a lot of people just slowly kind of abandoned essentially, and now it's like a ghoul haunted tomb, and we will actually see some Lovecraft ghouls towards at one point in the chapter, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's a cool, once again, Wagner kills it with like the locations, you know what I mean? Not only is it a tomb, but it's a forgotten tomb. You know what I mean? It's a place that no one goes to and is afraid to go to. And this is, of course, where Kane has posted himself up. But when they go into the chamber that where Kane lives, he's not there.
um,
And they're waiting for him.
yeah, they got their the light there, and they're hanging out, and ML's looking at everything, and he's noticing that like Kane's been breaking apart the coffins for firewood and just piling the bones up, and all the bones were, he says, broken apart with like the marrow sucked out, like, but they're old bones. Like Kane didn't do it, something did though.
Yeah.
And eventually he notices these books, and Emil at first is surprised because he thinks that Kane is just some bloodthirsty warrior guy. He doesn't know that Kane's also, well, immortal and a sorcerer and stuff, but he looks at the books and starts reading them, and he realizes that they're all books of black sorcery and stuff like that.
Yeah. I always love that dichotomy with Kane, where he's like this formidable warrior, but he's also this kind of like, scholar in some ways.
Yeah, he's both. He's both the guy who can strangle you with his bare hands, but he can also conjure a demon to devour your soul for eternity, like, just depending on what he feels like.
So he's commenting about why, how they're waiting for Kane, and is he going to show? Like, where is he? How come I'm waiting so long? That sort of thing. And then Kane enters from outside from the horrible weather with his dripping cloak, and he shows up and he's like, he experiences the glory of Kane firsthand.
Yeah. And I love he talks about the strangler's hands, and then It's another great example of the eyes of Cain, where he says, "The eyes of Cain were like two blue burning crystals of ice. Within them stirred a frozen fire of madness, death, torment, hellish hatred. They looked straight through Emil, searching out his innermost thoughts, searing his very soul. They were the eyes of a maddened killer."
Yeah, exactly, man. It's perfect. It's great. You know.
And Cain, and Cain then says, with a cruel laugh, Cain turned away, releasing Emil from the spell of his eyes. Like Cain knew what he was doing to this guy, you know.
Yeah, he was just making him aware that he was the top dog in this situation. You know, he was asserting himself, you know, in a none too subtle manner, you know.
Yeah. And Mel's pretty shaken by this. And we also get a hint of who his mistress is who sent him on this, and that she's also very scary, but Kane is scarier still, is basically kind of what we're being told. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then there's an interesting thing with the ring, like the amethyst ring, where Kane is like sort of like has this ring on him that Emil recognizes as
Right, because it's mentioned at the end of the prologue that our boss sees this guy was missing an earring, or an ear, I mean, who had a amethyst ring, and then amethyst ring shows up because Kane like flashes it at Emil, and basically he's telling Emil that, yeah, I killed your guy who's falling, you know.
yeah. So he had a bodyguard who was trailing him, and while Kane was like, I thought it was slick how he wasn't in his chamber. He was like observing them to make sure that there wasn't any hijinks going on. And he finds this guy and he just kills him, takes his ring.
Yeah, he was watching them approach from the outside, just to make sure everything was good. And then when he saw the bodyguard falling, he killed him, and then
It's like the sketchiest thing ever, you know? Like he's just like waiting out there in the darkness, you know?
right, what Kane can see in the dark
Yeah.
without light, so
Yeah.
yeah. And basically now Kane's like, let's get down to business. Like, why are you
Right.
here?
Yeah. What do you need from me? You know, like, what's the story? And this is when Emil goes into this big tale of why he's there and who sent him. So okay, so there's a little bit of backstory here.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of backstory.
Yeah, all right. So we have Nediston Marrel, who is the ruler of Thabnos, the land that Emil is from.
It's
Okay.
a group of it's like an archipelago of islands.
Yeah.
It kind of almost reminds me of in like Game of Thrones of the Iron Isles or something, the Iron Islands or something. You know, it's like
Yeah.
a kind of group of islands that are to the west in the ocean, and they're actually the oldest, like the oldest place the people, one of the oldest places that people came to. He says when they came out of the Western Seas. So I don't know if they're older than Karsutul or anything, but they're one of the first places people came to. So
Yeah, it's an ancient land, so that's important too. Um, so Marrel's father, Nediston Sirome, uh, died, and there was two brothers that had claims to the throne. There was Marrel and Lan, and Lan was a bastard, so he was a little bit further removed from the throne than Marrel. So Marrel was like the direct pretender to the throne. The problem that Marrel was having was that his wife was unable to bear him a male child, which was like would be his successor. Similar to Henry VIII, Henry VIII had all daughters for the most part, started rifling through all these different women.
except for Merrill didn't rifle through a bunch of women. He
No.
had this one wife who gave birth to a daughter and then died in childbirth, and his son died as an infant.
Well,
So
and they add that he ripped the son out of her womb to. And then
these guys are brutal.
yeah, like while
Yeah.
when she was dying in childbirth, he's like, "Fuck it," and he cut her open and pulled the baby out and realized, oh no, it's a male child who would have been my successor, and the child obviously perished too. You know?
Yeah, Yeah.
But they also added the line saying that he very much loved his wife, even though he like butchered her during childbirth.
Yeah. But and so he kind of went in the morning. So lay the was it laying I guess started getting some ideas of, well, maybe I can get my son to marry his daughter. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Doesn't matter if they're nephew, whatever. Yeah, apparently.
That's how
So,
they
yeah.
rolled back then, man.
Yeah.
Even in like, once again, Henry VIII, there was like definitely some unions that were a little too close for comfort, and if you ask me. But
Yeah.
and in Game of Thrones too, there's like incest was was part of that story too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so Lan had two sons, Lages and Roger. I'm going to pronounce it Roger, Roget,
The or
whatever.
it's either Lages or Rogi, I don't know.
Yeah,
Or Rogue, I guess you could
Rogue.
say. Who
Yeah.
knows? Yeah.
They take a lot of license in these pronunciations here. Roget died in battle, so that just leaves Lages. Well,
And
that's a good enough name.
Meryl's daughter is McCory.
McCory. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Lan was figuring that he would get his son, cozied up to McCory, and that's would be his rise to glory, through his son.
And they even have become lovers and stuff. So it's like his plan is working.
Yeah,
But then we find out about a land called Pelin, which is in the north of the islands, and that is the oldest part of the islands, the first place they came to. And what I found really liked in this is some shit that I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Like, our history is old. Nonetheless, strange stone ruins are found moldering in certain shunned locations among the islands defy all understanding. Of the race that built these monolithic citadels, we know nothing. Legend insists that these ruins were here before the coming of man to the islands. Certainly, the crumbling stones are of marvelous antiquity, and no man can guess what ages have passed since these cyclopean fortresses were raised, nor at whose hands they were destroyed. There are curious myths that hint of frightful carvings depicting colossal scenes of combat among monstrous sea beasts from a mad god's nightmare.
yeah. That's you and I are on the same page because that's what I used as the intro to this thing. It was that same,
As,
but mostly most a little bit more, but that was essentially the same passage. And so yeah, once again we have like some ancient race and an ancient land that has pre-human connections. What came to mind was like the Hyperboreans in the Conan stories, how there were these kind of like, you know,
I,
northern bizarre people.
I was also thinking maybe we're gonna get some fish people in this.
Well,
Who knows? But the way that essentially this woman Ephral comes from the north. She's like the queen of the north, queen of
yeah,
Pelin. But the way she's described does sound more like a Hyborian, like
yeah,
unearthly beauty, like maybe
yeah.
some old like elvish like race or something,
Yeah, there's like
or
they're not quite
demonic race.
human.
Yeah,
Yeah, not
yeah,
quite human. Like if you guys have read the Conan stories, they talk about Hyperborea, and that's like, this like eldritch, land far to the north, where there's like magical stuff that happens up there.
yeah. Like I mean, of course, it's the comics, but in the comics, Roy Thomas had them kind of be taller and kind of unearthly white and
Yeah.
kind of so the women are beautiful but it's kind of cold, like harsh beauty. So it does sound kind of like that in the story.
Yeah. Um, so we also have this body of water called Sworn Ellen, which is part of that area, part of that archipelago. You have to cross that or go around it to get to these islands, and that has its whole other uh, legends of sea monsters and just monsters and darkness and all this sort of peril to cross the Sworn Ellen body of
Yeah,
water,
it sounds like what's that the deepest part of the ocean that we have, the
the San Andreas Trench or whatever.
yeah, like it sounds like something like that, but there is something there. Part of the reason that I kind of think that there could be some type of fish people or sea monster thing going on in the story is because of something that happens later in the story
Yeah.
at
Uh,
the end of the section we're reading.
yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
but she doesn't read as fish woman, but who knows?
No. Oh, you never know.
Yeah.
So where do we get into this? That we had a little diversion here into the just those dark lands. Um, so yeah, so Meryl somehow becomes aroused and he takes another wife, Ephraim. Okay. And there's, definitely some legends about her. Um,
Well, and here's yeah, I like this part too. Deep beneath the cellars and dungeons of Dan Lega, black citadel of the Pelin lords, there is said to lie a great subterranean chamber. Within this vast cavern, the Pelin lords have for centuries tortured their enemies, pursued their infamous study of sorcerous lore. The few outsiders enter this chamber and merge again with whole mind, have told of a great pool in the floor of the cavern, whose waters rise and ebb with the tides. Into this pool's black depths have disappeared many of those secrets Pelin has not deigned to share. And it's said that Ephraim, in this hidden chamber 30 years ago, that Pelin or Othrin, the man monarch of Pelin, carried a screaming and naked girl. And though she was his teenage cousin Werrol, no man dared interfere. What they did there no man ever learned, for at dawn she crawled forth half lifeless and of madness in her staring eyes. Pelin Othrin was silent as what transpired, nor did any man dare inquire. Not long after, Leard, Othrin's wife, who had borne him no children, fell strangely ill and died. While the ashes of her pyre were yet warm, Othrin announced he would make Werrol his new queen. And
yeah.
so, and we also find out that Pelin is fine with queens. Like they don't have the kind of bias against uh, male or female heir. Heir is an heir in this world. So
Yeah.
and Pelin, but yeah, some people think that maybe he mated Werrol with a demon, or something. So it's definitely pretty. There's definitely something going on here, right? I mean, this reminds me very much of. Isn't there? It reminds me of Dunwich Horror.
I was thinking the same
Yeah,
thing, definitely. Yeah, like she's some like, other, elder god sort of offspring with a human, that kind of stuff.
yeah. Like what was the guy's name in Dunwich Horror who like mated his daughter with
Oh,
married his daughter.
Wilbur,
Wilbur's the son,
the
but his
son, yeah.
yeah, his grandfather, Waitley,
Whately, yeah.
old Waitley, he mated his daughter with, it seems to be possibly at Nyarlathotep or something like, or not Shub-Niggurath, but what do they always say? He is the key, like, but one of the elder gods, like on the hill in circle of stones, and then Wilbur and his brother are born. Like
Yeah, it's the same. It's,
yeah,
definitely a similar sort of concept there.
yeah.
And it's probably I would make the assumption that Ephraim kind of enchanted Meryl to even
Oh yeah.
have any interest in her too. Like there was some dark enchantment going on to like have them even get together.
Yeah, yeah, and like, you know, probably Meryl's a little bit older, and he sees a hot like younger lady who's into him, who's he gets excited about it, and but they say after they get married, his passions kind of
Yeah, it sort of loses interest in her.
particularly
So
because she won't get pregnant at all.
yeah, once again we come back to the male heir sort of conundrum that he's in. And that might have something to do with the fact that she's maybe not all the way human either.
Well, and also it stated that she seemed disenchanted because she seemed to think that if she like took him, um, got became queen, like then she could leverage that into power because she's used to being the queen of Pelin, like the
Right.
ruler of Pelin. Like, so I think she thought that, oh, I can like pull the strings, but Meryl isn't a guy who's lets his strings get pulled.
No,
So
no.
she became disenchanted as well. So maybe she kind of like dropped the enchantment on this guy and was like, but it doesn't end well.
Yeah, so she figures she would team up with Lan. So they start a clandestine relationship behind Meryl's back. And of course he finds out about that. you
And
know.
they're also planning on doing a coup against him, essentially, right?
Yeah,
So
so they're aligning some of the lords, some of the the more prominent people in that society, and there's this conspiracy to murder Marl as well.
yeah,
So yeah,
and then Leo can take over and or you know they can marry McClory and his son. But yeah, then Merrill finds out, and his vengeance is pretty fucking brutal because he murders all the lords who signed up to this conspiracy. He forces them to watch their entire retainers and family and everybody associated with them get murdered before their eyes before he has them killed. Like it's brutal as fuck. Like it
yeah,
sounds like hundreds, if not thousands, of people die because of this plot.
and he takes he tortures them to death. He takes his time, But before that, he and Lan have a sword fight, and when Lan's naked completely, it's like
Yeah.
as when he walks in on them, he's like naked because he
Yep.
was having sex with or was in bed with Efrel. But
And
Maryl's got full chainmail on, so he just takes him out, even though
it,
Lan is like maybe a superior swordsman than him.
yeah, and it says that they fought he did hold his own for a little bit, but I mean he was a little drunk and he just got laid and was completely naked. So the I just imagine it's a movie like some dude like just a sword fight with one guy totally naked and the other guy like in male. You know what I mean? Like just dick flapping everywhere while he's like sword fighting.
Yeah,
But he like cuts him in half, I think, or like through the shoulder or some shit. It's pretty
yeah,
brutal. Yeah.
yeah. So of course, Efrel is like with all the Lord's dead, everyone tortured to death, and their retainers dead, and Marl and Lan dead. Efrel is like really knows that this is going to go bad for her, so she tries to commit suicide, but the guards stop her from that. And Marl has like a very special execution plan for her, so they tie her to a bull and they she gets dragged through the city out into the hills.
Yeah. But Meryl makes a very bad mistake because he assumes that she's dead. But her retainers who got away managed to cut her and save her, even though she's fucked. But she does before they do this, she does curse Meryl, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
And but she does survive and she is the lady of ML, so
yeah. So her beauty is completely ruined, and now she's bent on vengeance. And so she's gathering an army, and she started delving deeper into her occult practice. And so Emil reveals that her plan is to find. So she becomes aware of Kane. Kane's this legendary mystical warrior, and she wants to retain him to essentially lead her navy.
yeah, he's going to be the commander, I think, of the whole thing, like the Navy and the Army and
Yeah,
and her basically she wants to subjugate the rest of the islands, and she says her offer to him is that you know help me subjugate the islands and take down Merrill, and you can have some of the islands for yourself. You just can't have Pelin or the other island, that Merrill is the king of. So
yeah,
he can choose one of the other ones. And we all know that this sounds like a good deal to Kane, like, and what I love about this is that I mean, Meryl's a fucking monster in his own right, but she is literally like the witch, like, evil, like, witch sort, like, it can, an average D&D campaign or something, she would be like the main villain, that you have to, like, go up against. And Kane is going to be like working for her. You know what I mean? Like we're definitely in that perspective of like those the Black Company novels or something where it's like you're from the perspective of the guy who's like the second in command of like the fucking evil like sorceress like you know what I mean?
yeah.
Which I kind of love that about this.
But Marrow is not a sympathetic character at all either. He's a
No.
brutal, ruthless sort of guy.
No,
Vindictive, petty.
you don't feel bad about her doing it at all. But she is like the sorcerer. She's doing like black arts and
Yeah,
comes from maybe half demon, and you know what I mean? Who knows? But I love that the moral relativity of these stories is so like out like this is definitely very grimdark where there's no good guy or bad guy. There's just people fighting or force.
You could also look at it too as like, it's pretty obvious that her relationship with Meryl was done through sorcery, and you could even say that she enchanted Lan too. You know what I mean?
More than likely.
So in a way, it's like you reap what you sow. So it's more like which character is there's varying degrees of evil and which character is the least evil that you would
Right.
sympathize with.
It's definitely a little bit different from Dark Crusade, where the villain, the guy from the cult leader in Dark Crusade, I think we can all agree was evil, like what he was doing. You know what I mean? Like, subjugating all the people, murdering all these people who don't agree with him. You know what I mean? Like he was like, uh, even though Kane's like reasoning for taking this guy down wasn't necessarily like to be a good guy. The guy that we encountered in Dark Crusade was so evil that Kane was like, "Oh fuck! Like we gotta take care of this guy." I think this story is a little bit different. It's a little more subtle so far. It seems like to me.
Yeah, or even, in Bloodstone too. You know what I mean? Where there's, clearly good and evil in that one.
And Kane was evil in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Although the only reason he took the Bloodstone down is because he didn't want to be controlled by it. It wasn't because if he could have made use of Bloodstone without it controlling him, he would have fucking done so. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So another thing I think was funny where is there's a sentence in there where Kane said he's intrigued, but he wants to look over her setup before agreeing. Like he refers to like a set, where her setup is over there. You know what I mean? I just think that was a funny choice of words.
It sounds very modern, right? It
Yeah, it's
sounds
very
like some,
modern. Yeah, like
yeah,
he's gonna look at someone's like amplifier or something.
yeah,
What kind of rig are you playing through?
yeah. He's kind of like, yeah, I'll go there. Let's see what she's got going on. Somehow I feel like this queen and Kane might get along, though. They both like plumbing dark secrets, and
We shall see. We shall
you know,
see.
but
Yeah.
who knows? Like, they're probably gonna. The problem is that Kane will probably try to like maneuver himself to get rid of her and take over, and
We know how
is that
this goes. Yeah.
and that's probably what's gonna probably. I don't know where the story is gonna go, but that might be my guess of what's gonna happen.
Yeah. So this is all well and good. We got these schemes going on, but the biggest obstacle is getting the hell out of town without getting found out by the authorities. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, we never know what Kane did. I don't think he ever says what Kane did in this place to get
Yeah, we,
all
we
these
don't know at
authorities
this
on him.
point. We
Yeah.
just know that he did something terrible and everyone wants to kill him. So,
Yeah.
you know.
My guess is that he probably insinuated himself in the local government and double crossed them and murdered somebody and it all went wrong, so he went in hiding or some shit,
Yeah,
like
exactly. So, not Meryl, Emil indicates that there's a ship offshore and they have to hightail it out of town.
Yeah, they got some horses and the problem will be getting to the coast where the ship is. The coast is like in like a little inlet somewhere. And but they have to go across and try to get through as fast as possible. And
So there's the
yeah.
next chapter is short and it's like this interesting little interlude with the cave spider.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
So,
at the end of this chapter, we also see the ghouls, who are definitely Lovecraft ghouls.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, then we get the weird thing with the cave spider. And I thought at the end of this was really appropriate it really explains, I don't know, it's something that really makes sense. Like Kane mindlessly just crushes the spider who's trying to, wrap up a bat that's caught. And he pulps them together. And then he says, clotted with fur and chitin and venom and gore, the chance missile spun slowly in the thick web. It was a thing of beauty, the web, and meticulously woven. Kane laughed mercilessly. His blade slashed the web to make a shroud. And
Yeah.
that seems like if there's one thing that could really sum up Kane in a kind of symbolic way, it's him seeing the beauty of this thing and then purposely destroying it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean that is 100% why this chapter was inserted into the story, just to kind of attest to his character, really. You know what I mean? I thought that's a really cool way of doing it.
Yeah, and it's very common with Wagner. He very rarely just lays things out like baldly. He's gonna kind of present things in this kind of almost symbolic fashion, but it's through his action. So, Kane's action, but there's an extra layer of symbol with the spider and the web, which I think is gonna have relevance to the novel. So there's a lot of layers going on in this like short little 3-page chapter.
Yeah. So the weather lets up, rain stops, and now our band of three people,
Well, I think
they
there's
well there's more people involved. It just but our core of three plus some of their crew, uh, they they set out for the coast to try to meet up with the ship.
Yeah, I think Kane says there's what, 9 soldiers
Not nine
altogether.
total, nine total. Yeah,
Yeah, and it goes well at first, but then they stumble into a small patrol, and one of the guys gets away and raises the alarm, essentially. So
yeah,
I think that's what happens, right?
yeah. And then
Yeah,
there's one of the guys that's part of their group. This guy Essen, uh, he somehow one of the guys infiltrate the group as Essen. Then so he has like his hood up, and this guy tries to stab Kane. He's an imposter, and then Kane snaps the bones of his wrist and like disembowels him and makes short work of the guy.
yeah, because Kane notices that there's like a blood stain on the front tunic, and so he realizes that this guy killed Essen and stole the tunic to try to
Yeah,
like
and
sneak in.
the
Yeah.
blood was actually Essen's blood. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and
yeah,
that must be. I think there was like a small like patrol. They killed like 3 of them, and the one guy said there was 5, but one got away, and then all of a sudden that's when the Essen guy I think shows up, who's probably the 5th guy of the patrol who decided to take Kane on his own.
bad
But
idea.
bad idea. But now bad news. The neighborhood is the alarm has been raised and.
Yeah, and now it's all out. Kane's found out. They ride basically into an ambush and they have to fight their way to the shoreline.
Yeah, so they get ambushed again by a kind of slightly larger group. I think pretty much all the guys get cut down except for their main trio, and but they do manage to get to the boat before they actually get out onto like the clearing where the boat they can see the boat, and the fucking there's like a huge like almost like a small army trying to converge on them. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? This they literally are sending like a fucking army after Kane, you know. But they do manage to get to like a rowboat to get out to the ship, and they're like Kane's like basically doesn't he like start yelling like curses at telling him oh he'll be back and
Yeah, he's like, yeah, yeah, he's just talking shit to them, like I'm coming back, like fuck you guys, I'll be back for you later.
there's there's one part where he thinks I'll come back when everybody I offended is dead and I'll fuck this place up basically.
Yeah,
Like
something
he
like
has
that.
he has
Yeah.
this like thought of like how like his revenge will be later when no one.
Like 500 years later, he'll probably come back when everyone's dead and he's going to destroy the city or something.
Yeah, he has a thought about that, I think, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of his take on it. It's
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny to think about that, like Kane, and then I love that in all the Kane stories. I love when we also return back to the scene of the crime, like where it's like everybody, it's like a legend, all these people, like this like ruined place, and Kane's like, oh yeah, I fucked this place up.
That happens quite a bit in the short stories too. That's like we see him returning to these ruined cities and he has recollections of them while they're, in their prime, and then typically he has a hand in destroying those cities,
Yeah, exactly.
bringing them into ruin, or some battle or, sieges and stuff like that.
I love it.
Yeah. So now we're on the ship. Um, Arbus is checking out Emil because he Arbus had sort of like a dim view of Emil. Like he thought like maybe he was this sort of you know like court sort of guy, like a guy who is a little soft. You know what I mean? Um, but I think he sees him now that he is kind of like a formidable guy. Maybe not quite in the same level as him and Kane, but he's definitely not a pushover. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they definitely figured it out through like the fighting and everything.
Yeah.
But ML is definitely like used to a certain level of lifestyle. Like it says that right away, like he's like, I need a bath and like
Yeah.
shave and put on some because he's been like skulking around, like trying to get hold of Kane, like in like these like dirty, like gross places in the city and stuff like that. And he's just like burning. I think they say that his attendants burned the clothes that he was wearing, like
Yeah.
like
Yeah, and he comes out on the deck in like kind of his like finery, there's like leather boots and nice clothes and everything.
yeah, cleanly, shaven and I don't know, like oiled and perfumed and everything. Like
Yeah,
he's the guy who likes the finer things in life.
exactly. Yeah. So then this is when they see sails on the horizon. So, that they did not stop at the shoreline. They launched a naval pursuit on our characters here out on the ocean. So now they're being pursued by ships.
Yeah, and then ML says, "Well, F, what's her name?
Efril.
Efrol told him to go into that, you know, deep water
Yeah, the
place,
Sorn Ellen.
Soren Ellen,
Yeah, thinking
and
that no one would follow them.
yeah, that's what he's thinking. Oh, they're not going to follow us,
Yeah.
but they do that, and this is what makes me think that there's something going on that's interesting. Is that they get kind of stuck in like this part where the wind dies down, and they're just in the middle of the Soren Ellen. And then Kane wakes up because he thought heard like ships being broken apart and all this stuff. And he gets up and he looks around and there's no ships or anything around. And Emerald thinks that it's that they just left, but Kane can see because he can see better than Emerald that there's like wreckage.
Yeah,
So it's
there's
like
like
those
debris floating on the ocean and things like that. Yeah.
yeah. So something came and fucked those boats up, but not theirs. And I think that's when Kane's thinking, okay, this lady might be a little bit strong, might be a little bit more than I was thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so like the things that I were running through my mind was that, there's a big buildup about Sorn Ellen and about how there's like sea monsters there and it's almost like a Bermuda Triangle type thing, where you go in there and your ship gets wrecked or you disappear or. So there's like this legend that people avoid it. They go out of their way, to get the Pelin to avoid that. So on one hand, I'm thinking that, it's likely that Efrol has enchanted their passage through there so that they can pass through there without running into anything. But there definitely is the feeling that there's monsters in the ocean.
Well, there's also the next chapter. One of the guys, the final chapter that we're covering. There's a whole thing about the weird. There's like weird uh
Clouds.
strange clouds racing across the skies in night wind, forming fantastic patterns as they passed over the dead white moon. Weird titanic figures writhed grotesquely as if possessed with life. And then this guy says, "Why do the clouds roll about so wildly?" And then another voice, which says, "They are gods in darkness," came the rasping reply, and they weave the lattice of man's fate from an infinite shades of cosmic darkness. You see their shadows now, for the forces of evil are gathering in celebration of the coming days. And then this guy disappears who said all this stuff to the seamen. And that is such a fucking awesome
Yeah, oh yeah,
paragraph,
yeah. So great. Yeah.
there to gods in darkness. Weave our fate from infinite shadows of cosmic darkness. It's so awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's great, great. So yeah, it's that's the close of part one, and that is a great way to end that section of the book. It's Kane's checking out this opportunity in Pelin. We get across we're entering Sorn Ellen, and obviously something is afoot there. Some dark magical thing is happening around them.
Yeah, it's still a mystery, like what broke apart those ships, you know? I We don't know. It could be a monster, it could be something. It is interesting that there's like these gods in darkness, these entities following them or there, like, who knows what the fuck's it. It's definitely setting up something really interesting, and I definitely think that this novel seems to be probably the most grimdark so far, and I have a feeling that it's going to continue being grimdark throughout. Like, I have a feeling that this novel is not going to end with anybody winning. If that makes sense. I think there's going to, it feels very. Already get the feeling this might be one of the darkest of the three novels. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get the same feeling too for this one.
Yeah, because you said you don't remember this one too
I,
well,
this
right?
one I have like hardly any recollection of reading. So I think I read this when I was like 17, I think. So, I still have the book, but I haven't read it since then, and that was a long
Yeah.
time ago.
Yeah, and I haven't read any of them, and I kind of been doing that purposely, stretching it out. Like I don't read, I only read what we're gonna read, so I don't know what's gonna happen yet. I don't spoil myself with it. It's very much a discovery. I've been doing that the whole time through the Kane,
Yeah.
through the Wagner stuff. Like even when we were doing in a Lonely Place, I only read each story as we covered it because I was just like, I like that kind of discovery, and I think that yeah, I'm pretty excited to get into this. It's definitely the longest one. Like I said, probably about 5 episodes altogether, which is fine. Like I said, I'm not in a
Yeah.
big hurry, and
No, totally.
yeah,
And it definitely starting off strong. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's got like a
Um,
good solid beginning.
Before we close out and everything, like, what have you been checking out, reading and shit like that for
Well,
recently over the past
um,
month?
yeah, so I just what the fuck did I just finish reading? Oh yeah, I just finished well, we talked about that, Echopraxia. I finished that. I've been reading these Joel Lane, what's the name? Right here. Where Furnaces Burn by Joel Lane,
I
and
need to
that's
pick
like
that up.
yeah, it's pretty excellent weird fiction. Like I was saying to you, it's a little bit different than other modern weird fiction writers because it's like subtle. Like in some cases, the supernatural element is more pronounced, and in other cases, it's inferred. You know what I mean?
Well, you'd say it's kind of Aikman-esque in a way, like in
Yeah, I
that
would say,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, like I read Swords by Robert Aikman under your recommendation.
yeah. What do you think of that
It
story?
was great.
It makes you feel a little weird after, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely feel a little weird. You know?
Particularly being a man, I think it definitely makes you feel
Yeah. Oh,
kind of
actually,
uncomfortable.
it's
Yeah,
that you mentioned Robert Aikman. Robert Aikman is it's well known that Joel Lane was a fan of Robert Aikman's too. So that's why it's I would put those two in the same realm. And also there's like this very morose vibe to his writing too, where it all takes place in like some industrial English town. Joel Lane's from Birmingham, so he has this like you can imagine all the characters listening to like Joy Division,
right.
like
Yeah,
Unknown Pleasures, or you can hear like that in the background, and I think there's references to Joy Division in the books, in the short stories too,
right.
and yeah, it's like a post-punk weird fiction writer,
Yeah.
and he died young. He died at age 50, so
When
that
was he writing? Was he writing in like the 80s or
he's was writing through the 90s, and
okay.
yeah. And actually, the Books Are Better Than Food podcast, they gave me a shout out because Cliff Sargent, the guy who does that podcast, covered All the Witnesses Are Gone, a novella by Joel Lane, which I referred to him. Like when he was on Everything Went Black, and I recommended that book to him, and he read it, and then he did a review of it, and he credited me for giving him the heads up on it. And that's another great book, which I read. I think I read that, last year or something. It was All the Witnesses Are Gone. It's like a novella, but once again, it just has that like, it's like if Ian Curtis was like a weird fiction writer, It's
I,
like,
I think that's a
ver-
good combination, though. I mean, like, I think a lot of you think about the fact that, like, Bauhaus, I mean, they have, you know, dark entries, right? Like,
yeah, yeah. That's
like,
that's an Aikman collection. Yeah,
yeah. Um, I think it makes sense to me that those two worlds can collide very easily. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then I read a short story by Isaac Asimov called Nightfall, which is about a planet that has multiple suns, and it's always daylight there. It's never dark, except for one time every 2,000 years, there's an eclipse of all the suns, and the Earth, that planet is plunged into total darkness. And that's when like all hell breaks loose. There's all these cults that are like, form around this impending doom that happens when the darkness comes, and cities burn, and there's this apocalyptic thing that happens. And that was expanded into a full-length novel, but I read the short story recently. That's a good one.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about
The
you?
I listened to the audiobooks for the whole of the Sprawl trilogy from William Gibson. So, Neuromancer, um, uh, Count Zero, and Mona Lisa Overdrive. So, and then I also listened to the audiobook of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is a novel I've read a handful of times, but it had been a little while since I read it last. But because we're going to be doing Joe and I for the 200th episode of Soul and Ox are going to do a Blade Runner episode
Oh,
because
cool.
Blade Runner's close to being my favorite movie of all time. I think maybe it
Great
might not be
movie.
might not be number one, but it's close to it. It's in the running. But I had to actually buy a new fucking. So I had to buy the Blu-ray box set, the old one, the 5 disc one, because I had the DVD one from back then, from 2007 when it came out, and the DVDs wouldn't play on modern Blu-ray players anymore.
Oh
So
man.
luckily,
Wow.
I found the Blu-ray version that has all the stuff on it for like $20. So
Damn, that's
like,
pretty cool.
yeah, so I upgraded it because it has all the different edits and everything. But definitely and then like I've read Neuromancer. I've read the whole Sprawl trilogy a few times, but I've read Neuromancer the most out of. It's one of my favorite science fiction type style novels. Like I really love. I'm a big fan of that whole cyberpunk type of.
Yeah,
When it comes to sci-fi, that's more my jam. Stuff that's not really set in like a far future. That's more like closer to our reality in a way. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
um and it was great. And the great thing about Gibson that I really like is that his stuff is like noir.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like
definitely. Yeah.
it's definitely future noir. If you read like even like Johnny Mnemonic, like the short story that they made the movie into, like in a lot of ways it's a noir story, and all of his stuff's kind of like that. It's like noir or like crime fiction, like they're trying to pull the big thing in Neuromancer is really trying to pull a heist, but it's just like this kind of like, you know, different type of setting, and I really love that about it. I did find out about a book that I guess is a very early classic of uh cyberpunk, which is on Audible for free, so I'm gonna listen to it. It's called Hardwired.
Okay, I haven't heard that.
Um, it's by, let me pull it up real quick because it's apparently Walter John Williams, and I'm pretty sure that this. I mean, from what I understand, this novel came out in the '80s, so it's like one of the quintessential like early cyberpunk novels, and I hadn't heard of it either. Yeah, it came out in '86. But this guy had some input upon like the original Cyberpunk 2013 and 2020 role-playing games
Oh,
because the
cool.
creator of those games, Mike Pondsmith, ended up becoming friends with him. And but yeah, Hardwired. It sounds really cool. I'm gonna listen to it because I guess it's like Mike Pondsmith in some interviews listening to is describing it as kind of like it's the kind of cyberpunk future, but it's a little bit more like wild. You know what I mean? Like then like Gibson's like very noir. Blade Runner is like everything's rainy and it's kind of like very nihilistic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
He said that Hardwired is more like the Gonzo, like the guy's like fucking, I'm just gonna fucking fuck everybody up type of main character. You know what I mean? Like it sounds like pretty cool, you know. Um,
What's the name of that again? What's this? What's it? Is it the book, the novel?
the novel's called Hardwired.
Hardwired. Okay.
Yeah, Walter John Williams. Yeah, 1986. You should see the cover for this first edition. It's very 80s.
Yeah.
If you go on Wikipedia, it sounds really cool. Like, and I've been playing the Cyberpunk 2077 game, and the kind of setup of the story sounds very much like something to be in. Because I guess Mike Pondsmith was very inspired by the kind of thing. It's a little bit more fun in some ways than say the real dour side of Cyberpunk. Although I think that one thing I noticed going through the Sprawl trilogy again is that William Gibson, his stuff's definitely very noir, but often it's a kind of um, they're rarely ever like downer endings per se. You know what I mean? Like he's not like a grimdark writer, at least for the Sprawl trilogy. Like there's like a bittersweet quality to the ending of his novels that kind of particularly like Neuromancer, but they do manage to accomplish what they set out to do. And the two main characters don't, spoiler, they don't die or anything. It's not like grimdark in that way,
Yeah.
but there is a weird kind of like bittersweetness at the end of the novel, like that I do like, and I do like the fact that he's not trying to be just because some writers do just cyberpunk and they're just like everything sucks and you're just gonna fucking get ground in the dirt and there's no hope and I think that can be cool, but I also like other types of styles of stories as well. You know what I mean?
I got to check those out. Like I've only ever seen Blade Runner. I never read Neuromancer or any of that stuff. Like that's, I have to read the Gibson stuff for sure. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Yeah.
I definitely I back the whole trilogy. It's really good. All the novels are short because we're back in the 80s when people wrote, you know, novels that weren't longer than 300 pages. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the thing was each one of them was like 8 hours, audiobooks. I listened to each one like in my work day, like pounded it out in like, 3 days or 4 days or something like that. So and if you're actually reading them, they're very quick. I'm now starting up his other trilogy, which starts with this novel called Virtual Light. But after that one, there's no audiobooks, and I'm reading it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I I've been kind of obsessed with Peter Watts's ideas about consciousness, which are described in his novel Blind Sight, which is the book, the sort of precursor to echopraxia. It's I've been online, there's like interviews with Peter Watts where he talks about, there's an alien in Blind Sight, there's an alien race that's intelligent but not conscious. It's interesting. It's like it breaks it whole down where there there there's no free will. Everything is like a reaction to something. So they have this incredible database of information. So if something happens, they have a response to it. You know what I mean?
it's kind of like an alien AI creature because
Yeah,
that's how most AI works currently.
right.
It just goes off of it's reactive, goes off of prompts. It can't actually think for itself, right? So
But these are actual physical beings though.
that think
You know?
that operate in that way, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, but there's no individuality. They don't have any personalities or anything like that. Yet they could construct these like intergalactic, spacecraft and things like that, and design technology to upload all of the information from the planet Earth, and but they're just so super advanced in that realm without having any consciousness. They're intelligent without consciousness, and it's like such a mind-blowing concept. You know what I mean? It's like, the I think there's a book that came out before that because there's reference to another one. I think it's called Firefall, which I haven't read, where that's when the aliens come to the planet Earth and there's an event where they upload everything and then they just disappear. And then years later, in Blind Sight, this craft comes out through the Kuiper Belt, and that's when they send a ship out to check it out, to investigate it. And they're speaking to these creatures in English, and they're giving English responses back because they know all of the data on the planet Earth. So,
Right.
so you're sending out like a stimulus to them, and they're responding, but they're giving you the answer to what your questions are, but they're not like a conscious being. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like very, very much like AI, but they're actual physical biological creatures.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like the um totally unbalanced like it's like if human was totally just intellect divorced from body and soul, you know what I mean?
Well, it's
Like if
almost
you,
like
yeah.
it's almost like what Ligotti touches on in The Darkness to Shadow, where there's like this mechanical force that drives life forward, and there isn't anything like personality or consciousness is actually an illusion,
Yeah.
and it falls in line with like that whole pessimistic, philosophy, which that's kind of why I think I'm gravitating towards that.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. I definitely need to does the blind side is the first is the one the uh right the that one's on Audible for
Yeah,
included in the thing, so
yeah,
I
I
did
would check
download
that
it.
out.
I just haven't listened to it yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fucking dense, dude. It's like he's a hard sci-fi writer. You know what I mean? So there's like whole passages where they're talking about like the ventilation system of the ships and like the propulsion system and like how this works and that works, and it's like, very technical, it's cool. I mean, I enjoy that, but it's really, really dense, you know what I mean? But and once you get into the flow of the story, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. Like hard sci-fi, I can be like it's hit or miss for me. But
Yeah.
if it's got cool concepts, then I'm good. You know what I mean? It's just if it gets too Star Trek-y, I kind of tend to like get a little. I'm not too into like Star Trek type stuff. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, I'm the same way, but like this was referred to me. Uh, my friend Chris Mountain referred this to me because he knows the kind of stuff I like, and he likes a lot of the same stuff we do. And it's definitely more horror based, and that,
It sounds like these aliens are kind of horrific in a certain way. The way I'm sure as it progresses, you're kind of like, you know,
and there's also a vampire too. There's a vampire involved in the story.
oh
Yeah.
really?
Yeah,
That's
he's
cool.
he's the idea with the vampires too is there was like a dead end in human evolution where the vampires actually existed parallel to humanity, like in some ancient time. And then they reincarnated through cloning these vampires. And the guy who's in charge of the mission is a vampire because of his like tactical abilities, like their minds work in a different way, where their decision making will be the best for the mission if you have that vampiric sort of processing of information, and he's actually a neutral character. He's not evil in the book, you know.
Right. He's just a vampire. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
cool.
it, and
I like
it
that.
goes yeah, and it goes into the why crosses work, and it's kind of cool. It's like yeah, so there's that too, which is
Okay.
thrown in there.
So it's like adding some hot sauce that a lot of sci-fi authors kind of shy away from, huh? Like, because
Yeah, he's
you're adding vampires and stuff that like some hard sci-fi guys would probably like not be in, might not go for it, but that sounds
yeah,
cool to me. You know, I
yeah,
like
it's
that.
very, very
Yeah.
cool, very
Yeah.
cool, and it's like yeah, I think Watts is like a horror writer, like disguised as a hard sci-fi writer.
Right.
And I think I read that he has an engineering background or something like that. He's either like it's either engineering or like physics, so he's into all the fucking technical like aspects of it, like space flight and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I think it does make it cool. Like, what's the guy's name? The guy who did all the d designed a lot of the ships and stuff like that for like Alien and Aliens. I can't think of his name. The concept artist. he did a lot. Like he's one of those guys too who's like super fascinated with the way things work. So like that's why the ships in Alien and Aliens all make sense and they all like look like real ships that could actually exist. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because
exactly.
I can't. I think I forget his name is Mike something. I think, but I mean his work is so cool that he really like gets in there and like designs it where can make sense. And I think that helps with when you're doing science fiction because if it kind of all makes sense, you're like, okay, this is cool. Like it kind of helps you kind of get into it a bit more, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So that's kind of what I've been into. I got a bunch of stuff on deck that I want to read. There's like um there's I want to read the rest of those there's a series that's called the Hyperion series. It's like another science fiction sort of series, but it combines like sword and sorcery and like science fiction. It takes
Okay.
place on a different planet. And that's something that's interesting to me too. Became it's something that came up in a bunch of these like booktube channels I watch. And at first I'm always very dismissive of most science fiction, but then when there's something that's like hit something with me like this, it sounds like, there's like cults and like, these kind of like satanic creatures and things like that. It sounds interesting.
So it's kind of like Sword and Planet, the
Sword and
type
Planet.
of
Well,
like the kind of
it's not well
John Carter Mars type of thing or something.
when I think of Sword and Planet, I think of like a guy from Earth being transported to some far-flung planet
Oh,
as like it's not like that, but it's like
yeah. Although
there's like
there are versions of Sword of Planet where it's all set on, not somebody going to not John Carter where they go from Earth to Mars, but it's like it's just a different planet that's like
yeah,
it's kind of like
yeah, something like
yeah.
that, So that's kind of like I've downloaded there's a trilogy and I have that on my Kindle right now, and I'll probably get into that after I finish reading this stuff.
It's I mean, it's not too far off from depending on what elements you're adding, it's not too far off from just fantasy because if you're making a fantasy world like and there's like its own continents and stuff and it's not really set on Earth per se, you can do whatever you want really, right? So it's not too far off from like yeah, this is just a different planet and you know
Yeah.
I think it really becomes more sci-fi if you're adding in maybe this planet's got like spaceships or something, you know
Well,
what I mean?
that's what
Yeah.
this has is like there's like technology like that involved too.
Right. But it's
Yeah.
like technology, but they still fight with swords sometimes or whatever, which
Yeah, there's like swords and like some kind of ray gun, and like flying
yeah.
ships and stuff like that.
I think that's something cool. I think it's fun.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
definitely.
like it's you kind of your suspension of disbelief is more because you don't need to believe that the way spaceships can be more like stereotypical or like do or whatever. Things don't have to operate like in a realistic way, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
no, totally.
yeah.
And the evil entity is more like in some ways more like a Lovecraftian creature because it's like with Lovecraft, there's no magic. It's just weird technology or weird physics or something like that. And I think that's kind of like the entities that are involved in the Hyperion trilogy are more Lovecraftian in that way.
Yeah, it's like magic, but it's not really magic like the way people think it is. It's like a kind of magic and technology intersect, or
Yeah.
yeah, because there's some aspects of magic because Keziah Mason does seem to use some type of magical technology to, but it's like using like angles and stuff, right? So it's
Yeah.
to like rip open a gate in reality or something. It's really yeah.
Or even like the technology that Kane uses in like Bloodstone or something like that, where it's like some super advanced race that looks like magic to most people.
Yeah, and in Kane, the magic that does exist is primarily to kind of do that same thing of ripping apart the planes or open a gateway to the other planes, but these are entities that exist.
Yeah.
It's not like magic in the way people think. It's like like in a lot of the stories, Kane rips open this gateway and some eldritch creature comes through, but it's a blood and flesh creature. It's the same thing
Yeah.
of Howard as well.
It's
Howard's magic
more
is the same way.
like those entities are preternatural as opposed to supernatural. You know what I mean? They're like these from a different realm completely. So they have different laws and, different, configurations and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Which I like that. I like the kind of like, yeah, these things truly exist. They're not just like, like you can pull them through some type of weird like space-time portal and they're here now and they're gonna gobble you up or some shit. I think that I like that kind of approach.
Yeah. I was thinking about like Event Horizon because I recently watched a movie that was ultimately very disappointing to me called Ash, which looked a lot like Event Horizon, but
The
kind of,
seemed like the story of that was basically just a ripoff of Event Horizon, right?
yeah, not yes and no. I mean, it was kind of like it fell short. Let's put it that way. But like when they travel into hell, like the realm of hell in Event Horizon, it's like I because I've seen that movie like I don't know, like 20 times maybe in my lifetime. It's like one of my favorite movies. Like I like to think that them being in hell is like how a human would react to that dimension, the environment in that dimension would drive them insane. But
Yeah.
if you're of that dimension, it's
No,
not
it all
insane.
makes sense. Yeah.
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 I love that concept of hell or concept of like a hellish realm or something like that,
It's like the Cenobites, and Hellraiser.
Exactly. Yeah. You know.
That's what the Event Horizon always made me think of too, is Hellraiser. Like it felt like you just opened it's like the whole ship was just the box and you opened up the fucking gate to the Cenobite. That's what it seemed like in some way.
Those two films, those are like probably two of my favorite all-time films, especially, I mean, I love Hellraiser. I love the character of Uncle Frank, like this guy who's actually his Frank Cotton in The Hellbound Heart is way more interesting than Frank in the movie too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like there's this whole he's just a guy who's just pushing his desires and this darkness and he's going into these dark pits of, trying to like push experience. And he finds exactly what he's looking for and it destroys him, you know what I mean? But like in the Hellbound Heart, he says he truly loves Julia in the novella. And he says to her like something along the lines of like, maybe if I'd met you earlier in my life and we'd fallen in love, like I wouldn't have traveled down this dark path of like destruction, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I love that character, man. It's like such a cool like concept for him.
He's definitely developed more in the novel, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Their novella, yeah. Because I just read that not long ago, and I bought the audiobook version of Clive Barker reading it,
Oh
which,
wow.
yeah, which you
Yeah,
need
I
to
got
look
to
up.
do that. Yeah, I have Audible now, so I should probably check that out for sure.
Oh yeah, you should definitely check it out. There's a version that Clive Barker reads that I bought, and it's pretty cool. It's cool to hear him read it. I know.
Oh, I can imagine. Definitely.
And since you have Audible, the Hardwired book I mentioned is included in the subscription, so
Cool.
you
Yeah, I
can
should
just
check
add it
that
to your
out.
library and download it, and
Hell yeah.
yeah. So which is a nice thing about Audible. Sometimes books are just in. I always like it when you find a book that's like included and like and a lot of times they'll put like the first book of a trilogy, try to get you hooked, so then you
Oh
buy the other
yeah.
two. Like, but
Yeah.
it's definitely happened to me. Like they did that with or it's the opposite. I bought the Nova trilogy from William Burroughs on Audible. Um, but I think that initially it was like yeah, that was one of those ones where the first one was included and the other two you had to buy. Eventually, I ended up having to buy the first one anyways because it stopped being included. But it's always annoying when it happens when you're like, yeah, you get to. Sometimes you get lucky though, like the R. Scott Baker series. All of them were included on Audible, and I managed to blast through it before they went
Oh
off of
wow.
Audible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which
I,
was
I
was quite a feat because that's like seven novels that are pretty horrible,
I
but
got
very
to
very good.
that's another reading goal for you this year is to get back to those because I started reading the first one, it just didn't hit with me, but I think that it just wasn't I wasn't in the right mindset to read it or something.
Yeah, I think you have to be in the right mindset, and you kind of have to get into it, if that makes sense. And I think it might have helped actually doing the audiobook for me because one thing I found with audiobooks is that sometimes you can kind of power through because you're listening to it you can kind of power through certain parts that you might, if you're reading, you might end up having to like reread a handful of times, or
Yeah.
like try to sort out what's going on. When you're listening, it's just kind of goes through, and then you can kind of get into it. And like I actually will say that I think listening to somebody read Blood Meridian is the way to go with that, because I find I love Blood Meridian, but reading the novel can be a little confusing with the dialogue, and
Yeah.
there's no sometimes you don't know
No,
who's saying what. And
yeah, there's no punctuation and shit like that. Yeah.
yeah, when I listened to the audiobook, the guy did different voices for all the characters, and suddenly it all like it was awesome. It was like you just get totally entranced into it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes some things seem to do better in audio format, some things don't. That's something I found.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're off to the on a good start with Darkness Weaves. And yeah, I look forward to getting deeper into this novel.
Yep. Next episode will be the first half of part two. So I think it's 5 or 6 chapters or something like that. Because I think there's 13, 14, might be 7 chapters. We'll see. I need to count it again. But
Right on.
so if you want to read along. So
And I do know that some people do read along with this, so that's kind of cool.
yeah, it is cool.
Yeah.
So I like to give him a heads up. I mean, I don't know how it is on Everything Went Black, but it's basically probably the same 30, 40 guys who listen to every
It
one of
probably
these,
is
so.
the same people. Yeah.
So it's not. It's like they got the core group of people who like these episodes. So
Yeah.
follow along.
All right, guys. Well, we'll everyone have a good week, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Take
Oh
care.
yeah.